So yeah, that's pretty much all the updates that I have. And now let me introduce you to our special guest. So actually, I had seen him. I've seen his name everywhere. He's a top close. If you don't know who he is, I'm sure he's going to introduce himself. But he was on the last immersive call, and he was talking about batteries. And obviously, with NEM and all those the shift in the industry going on in California, that's where the majority of our team is. But with that shift going on, me and Bo were always trying to get ahead of upcoming issues and things like that. That's why we got Sonova. That's why we got all these different trainings that we've had since NEM went through. As soon as I seen the training, I reached out to Mike. I think as soon as he was done on Facebook, and he responded. And he's kind enough to get us connected with his secretary so we could put him on the schedule. We actually had to plan this out, I think 4 or 5 weeks in advance, whenever the last immersive was, and yeah, we got it planned out, and it just so happens to be on Star Wars Day. So May the 4th be with you, everyone. So I was gonna put a message on WhatsApp, please wear some Star Wars attire. Maybe I'll send you like a $5 Starbucks card or something. But anyways, yeah. So I'll go ahead and shut up and pass it off to Mike, and go ahead, brother. Take it away.
Appreciate it. Happy to be here. So like Anthony said, my specialty is basically batteries. I live in Florida, work primarily in Florida. We get these pesky things called hurricanes that like to knock the power out. Just last week from a random thunderstorm, we lost power for 20 something hours. So batteries have been huge for my career here. They've built, some of the best referrals I get. If you can imagine, when it's 95 degrees out and your air conditioning works, your next door neighbor might want to know why when theirs is out and they're sweating inside. So it's great. It's something that is much more complicated than solar systems alone, especially when we start looking at daily usage like you will in California. But if you can really get this down, it's going to open up a whole nother level to your career. So what we're going to go over today is just a quick recap. I'm sure all of you, at least in California, know what 3.0 is, but why our battery is going to be essential now under this new regulatory structure. What batteries do we have? There's some changes coming there, but we'll go over what we have right now. And then what do you need to think about when you're designing these systems? And then some advantages that each of the brands can offer. This is going to be kind of an overview. Typically, these tend to be like 50-50, 50% me going over this stuff, 50% questions. If you have questions on the spot and you don't want to forget them, throw them in the chat. We'll address it at the end. Otherwise, at the end, we always do a good Q&A session also. So what is NEM 3.0? Basically, your government succumbed to political pressure from the utilities and has pulled away a lot of the financial incentives to residential distributed rooftop solar. Same thing is happening around the country. This was maybe the first domino to fall. In Florida, we were almost the first domino to fall last year until our governor vetoed it, thankfully. So, with how big California is, for that domino to fall, even if you don't work in California, it's coming. It's going to spread like a virus, unfortunately. So basically now under this new NEM 3.0, your export value, or how much money you get when you send electricity back to the grid, is based on an hourly rate. And it varies month to month and differs between weekends and weekdays. And I'll show you that in a second. For both PG&E and SCE, you have export adders. That is to kind of help soften the blow, or so they say anyways, based on the time of connection. So the sooner you get solar, the bigger the export adder. As you go along the next 9 years, they will be shrinking and shrinking until they go away. You also now have a monthly true-up bill. So gone are the days of waiting till the end of the year and getting a big bill. If you owe them money, they want it right now. And then finally, you'll be capped at 150% oversizing. So they're giving you less value for the extra energy you send them. They're also limiting how much extra energy you can send them. So I mentioned the export schedule. So here's an example. I believe this is every year for PG&E. And when you look through here, you can see, based on the hour of the day, how much money are they going to give you for each kilowatt hour that you send them. And as you would expect, the electricity for the most part is more valuable when you're not producing any in the middle of the night and again in the evening. You get to the middle of the day when demand tends to be kind of low and production tends to be kind of high. And you're giving them anywhere from, in March at 11 o'clock in the morning, you're going to give them 0.6 of a penny per kilowatt hour is what they're going to give you for each kilowatt hour that you send them. Fast forward to April, 0.3 of a penny. Go an hour later at noon, you're donating your electricity to PG&E. They're going to give you nothing. Now, there is one little bright spot here. We fast forward to September, and you are lucky enough that you're still producing energy at 6 and 7 o'clock, you're going to get up to or over $3 per kilowatt hour. Basically, in a nutshell, there's two theories why this happened. One is that they wanted something on here for political reasons. Hey, look, we're going to give them money. This is just when we need electricity, knowing that you're not going to have much surplus production at that time. But the other and more practical thought behind it is that's just when they're really hurting for electricity. They really need the electricity, so they're going to incentivize you to give it to them. And that opens up some opportunities that we have with batteries, and you'll see here in a second. So why are batteries essential now? I mean, I think you just saw that you're not going to get any real value from sending your electricity back, right? I mean, even all the different news organizations are already all over this saying, hey, people are going to be looking at batteries, but we need to look for some future battery technologies that are maybe a little cheaper, last a little bit longer, and so on. So like we talked about, when you export energy, let's say it's at noon in June, you're getting nothing, absolutely nothing from the utility for it. Any other time, except for that tiny little green window in September, you're getting a very, very, very discounted price relative to what it's going to cost you to buy electricity from the grid. So rather than sending them your surplus for pennies, wouldn't it be better if you could hang on to it, store it, hang on to it for later in the day when you need it, and effectively get full value for it then? That's what batteries are doing. The batteries we sell are programmable. You can prioritize self-consumption. You can program them for your peak rates. That exact rate schedule you just saw, you can have that programmed in there. So your system knows when to charge, discharge, when to send energy to the grid, when to hang on to it, and so on. And then you'll see here in a little bit, under certain circumstances, batteries might even allow you to exploit a loophole, which would allow you to expand an existing system without losing their NEM 2.0 or even 1.0 grandfather status. There's still some uncertainty here whether the utilities are going to allow this, but as it is currently written, this is an opportunity that may come in the near future. So what does Powur offer in terms of batteries? Got two great brands, very, very different on a technical level, but they accomplish the same thing, just in a different way. I'm going to start with the SolarEdge home battery. This is our newer option. It's our more powerful option. It's actually the one that I'm having installed on my house. This is a DC coupled battery. Okay, so what that means is that the energy that's produced obviously at the solar panel is in DC, and it comes down to the energy hub inverter. And at that point, a decision is made. If you're going to need the electricity for your house, it goes to the inverter, becomes AC, and you use it. If you need to export it for whatever reason, again, it goes through the inverter, becomes AC, and you export it. But if you need to hang on to it, so you don't need the electricity, your batteries have some capacity, it doesn't get converted. It stays in DC, goes straight into those batteries. So that's more efficient. You're not losing energy from excess conversions. It also allows the battery to be tied to a larger inverter than what you could fit inside the battery itself, which is why this battery has a higher power output, which, if we're honest, is more important for backup purposes than your daily use California purposes. So these batteries have a 7,500 watt peak output. That would be something like for starting an air conditioner, an instantaneous peak, and then it can drop down and sustain 5,000 watts per battery. With a max output wise of 2 batteries per inverter, you can actually tie 3 batteries per inverter, but it doesn't increase your output anymore. Beyond that, being that these batteries are directly tied to the inverter, you have a couple more, I guess I'd call them niche advantages. One of them is that you can oversize up to 200% without losing any production, as long as you have the properly sized battery. And the reason for that is, if you think about, for easy math, let's say we had the Energy Hub 10,000, so it's a 10,000 watt inverter, and you hooked it all the way up to the maximum, up to a 20 kilowatt system. Whatever that system's producing, the inverter can only handle at one time 10 kilowatts. 10,000 watts. But because you have those DC coupled batteries connected directly to it, any excess production that the inverter can't handle can go straight into those batteries and be stored for later on when it can go through the inversion process when you need it. This also means you're less likely to need a main panel upgrade, which I understand is a big concern out in California, adding time, adding expense, and so on to your projects. If you can put in a smaller inverter tied to a smaller breaker, even with the larger solar system that you need, by having batteries on there, you're less likely to need that main panel upgrade. In addition, because the batteries tie directly to that inverter, they're behind the same breaker, and the breaker is not any larger whether you have batteries or not. Compared to an AC coupled battery you see in a second, it has a separate connection point. So you have the breaker size for the solar, plus the breakers for the batteries, which makes you more likely to need a main panel upgrade. This is what they look like. This is two of them. They are completely rated to be indoors or outdoors. Clearly, this one's outdoors here in Florida, where we get some pretty crazy weather. Fully sealed units, passively cooled. There's no cooling fans in them. Mine will be outside as well. They're completely warranted, completely able to be out there, and pretty good looking units, pretty clean. Other benefits of the Solar Edge home ecosystem, as they're now calling it, that's the battery, the energy hub, and so on, is that they're adding a bunch of smart home equipment to it. So the EV charger, I think, is actually one of the coolest features. I've been using this to help close the deal. I'm getting it installed at my house as well. This EV charger is like none other in the industry right now. It connects directly to the inverter as well. So first of all, that means that you have no breaker for an EV charger. Again, less likely to need a main panel upgrade. You don't need to put another 40 or 60 amp, or if we're talking like a Ford Lightning, 80 to 100 amp breaker in your panel. You're running it right off of that inverter. It can charge faster than a typical charger could, because it can pull up to 40 amps from the grid and up to 20 amps from solar if your production's good enough at the same time, and charge at effectively 60 amps. But the biggest advantage, I think, to this EV charger is it has the capability to charge while you're off grid, as long as you have batteries. And it's doing that without competing with your home. So it has what they call surplus mode. And in surplus mode, if you think through an outage scenario, we'll use a hurricane in Florida. Storm blows through, does a bunch of damage, power goes out. That day of the storm, that night, you want to be prioritizing, right? Rationing your energy for whatever your highest priorities are. But then that weather goes away. And the next day, you wake up, nice sunny day, but there's so much damage everywhere, the power is still out for days or weeks. I mean, Hurricane Ian, a lot of places here were without power for 2 to 3 weeks. But the weather's perfectly fine. Your solar kicks on, it's producing, you're using energy in your home, it's recharging your home battery. But at some point, if sized properly, your batteries will get full, and your house is not going to need as much as the solar is producing. So in that case, you typically just lose production because there's nowhere for it to go. But when you have this EV charger connected in surplus mode, it's going to take only that excess and put that in your car. So yeah, it's not charging it at full speed. You certainly can do that. But it's also not competing with your house. And it's just helping you retain energy that you otherwise wouldn't have. As more and more people shift to electric vehicles, especially in outage-prone areas like the Southeast, I think this is going to be really important. Another cool feature they have coming out is load controllers. So think along the functionality of a span or a lumen smart panel, but with much lower expense. Again, I have some of these coming for my system. Basically, what it allows me to do is through the same Solar Edge app, where I'm controlling the solar, controlling the battery, controlling my EV charger, I can control my heavy loads. So I'll have my air conditioner, I'll have my well pump, I'll have the sub panel that goes to my barn, I'll have whatever heavy, basically 220 volt loads that I have in my house tied to this load controller. And as I mentioned in that scenario, during the storm, when the production's not good, one button, one click on my phone, those loads are dead, and I'm prioritizing. Fast forward to the next day, production's great. I have surplus, turn them back on with one button. I don't have to go outside, go to my breaker panel, turn things on and off. I don't have to not have them in my sub panel because they would exceed the output. And also I can control them when I'm not home. So if I get a notification on my phone that there's an outage, I'm out, hopefully at someone else's house selling them batteries. I can open up my phone. Okay, turn off the air conditioning or turn off whatever, save the battery because I want the AC to work when I get home. There's more things coming out, smart outlets. They're going to be integrating with some smart thermostats. That is really exciting to me because the way that should work, again, we'll go to the same scenario. You have an outage in Florida. Trust me, you want your air conditioning to work. Right now, it feels like my air conditioning is not working. It feels like my house is about 80 degrees. But you want it to work, but you also don't want to run your battery completely dead and then have to go the whole night without AC. So the thermostat could integrate with the system and know, okay, what's my state of charge? What other loads are pulling? What is my solar output like? Okay, it all looks good. I've got excess electricity. Let's run the thermostat how we normally would. Or on the flip side, we're in ration mode. It's going to pull up a profile that is keep the house livable, but don't waste all my electricity. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, you haven't caught the theme here. I'm building my system as a demonstration. I want to basically put everything on that so I can show people. You can integrate it with existing standby generators. So my house, when I bought it, came with a 17 kW Generac. When we lost power last week for 20 hours, I dread to even think about how much propane that thing burned, which is why I'm replacing it with batteries. But rather than throwing it in the garbage, I'm having it wired to the battery system. So that way, if we ever have some crazy scenario where there's an outage and the sun doesn't come back out right away, I have that third line of defense. The generator can actually recharge the battery. And new for them, you could actually have them put in a twist lock connector and run just like a Harbor Freight portable generator. Doesn't even need to be an inverter generator because the energy is going to go through the SolarEdge inverter, get cleaned up, turned into DC and go into the battery that way. So really, it's hammering my favorite things: redundance and security. And that's why I'm a big fan of this product. The end-phase battery. So this is obviously what you would pair if you did an end-phase system. These are a little bit more modular and they're AC coupled. So we talked a little bit about this when I compared it to DC coupled. Basically everything except for SolarEdge is AC coupled. Enphase, Tesla, Franklin, they're all AC coupled because it's an easier installation, easier retrofit, I should say. But AC coupled means that when you produce the energy, no matter what, it gets converted from DC to AC. And then it gets to the battery, and the battery has its own inverters, and it converts from AC back to DC. And then when you need to use it, it goes through the battery inverters again, DC back to AC. You can see how that would be easier to retrofit because we're not sharing any system components with the solar, but you can also see how that's less efficient because we have 3 conversions now rather than 1. The end-phase battery comes in 3.3 kilowatt hour increments. We typically sell the 10, so that's 3 of the 3.3, 9.9 kilowatt hour battery. They do have a separate connection point, so they're not hidden behind the solar inverter. So you do have to make sure you have enough panel capacity for the breakers for the batteries you're going to be installing. Each of the 3.3 kilowatt hour batteries has 4 microinverters tied to it, so you have 12 in the full 10 kilowatt hour battery. Advantage there is a redundancy thing. Just like everyone selling in-phase systems probably harps on. If you lose one, you still have 11/12 of your battery's power output. Now, speaking of power output, it is lower because you have less inverter capacity there. So you've got a 5 kilowatt peak output, 3,800, 3.8 kilowatt sustained output per 10 kilowatt hour battery. So basically, what that means from a practical point of view is if you're sizing the system for backup to back up larger loads, you would need more of these than you would a SolarEdge or some of the other brands of batteries out there. The next generation battery that they have coming out, they've teased some of the specs. I can tell you the output is going up, but in a lot of scenarios, it will have to be software detuned. And that is because of the separate breaker connections. If you were to go with the larger output, being that these have their individual connection points, you would very quickly end up in a scenario where you're sometimes even having to do a 400 amp main panel upgrade, which can get really expensive. So they're selling them with, I don't know the exact number, but a higher potential power output and the ability to software detune it down in case you need a certain breaker size to be able to fit it in without triggering those infrastructure upgrades. This is what they look like. The left picture is with the casing off. You can see each of the 10s is 3 subunits, and each of those subunits has the 4 micros in it. And then on the right side, you can see outside 2 of the batteries installed, as well as the controller unit. Again, they're passively cooled, no cooling fans, completely sealed units, perfectly fine inside or outside. So what do you need to think about when you're designing these systems? First and foremost, what's the goal? Obviously, a lot of these people are going to like both the backup and the self-reliance capability. But when I say goal, what is number one? If it's backup, power output is king. If it's peak shaving, self-consumption, time of use, something like that, energy capacity is king. Also, what is the lifespan and warranty of the batteries? What special features do the batteries include that might align them with your primary goal? So, like I said, if backup's your primary, power output is king. Feel free to check my YouTube. I've got some very, very long, detailed trainings on sizing batteries for power output. We'd be here for another 3 hours if we went into those details. Also, if you need help falling asleep, it's a great place to go. If self-consumption or maximizing time of use is king, is the goal, energy capacity is the king. That's primarily what we're going to talk about today, because this training is kind of geared towards introducing batteries to a market that hasn't really needed them before, and that's California. When I say that, there's also utilities around the country that have net metering schemes similar to 3.0 in California. I'm doing one today in Florida, City of Leesburg Electric. They're terrible. So I have to build the system as though we're in California on 3.0 with batteries for daily use, or it's just not going to work. And then the goal is basically figure out how much energy the house might consume during peak, and minimize any electricity that you have to buy at that time. So here's a great picture. This is kind of showing the a house's typical demand, right? So if you think during the morning, there's not a lot of demand, not a lot of demand, then people wake up. And when they wake up, they're taking showers, they're cooking breakfast, they're making their coffee, they're running hair dryers, which is one of the things that is probably one of the worst things to run on a battery. And their demand spikes, right? But at the same time, your production from your solar is probably pretty low here. The sun's just coming up, depending on what time you get it. Fast forward into the afternoon, people go to work, they go to school, whatever it might be. And you see these occasional spikes from air conditioning kicking on, or middle of the day, maybe they're home and they're cooking lunch or something. But as a whole, the demand is a lot lower throughout the day. Also known as the time of the day that you're producing the most energy. So you can see that when you produce the energy, it doesn't really match up with when you need it. And then you get to the evening. And the evening's the biggest spike, right? People get home, they cook dinner, they're doing house chores, laundry, dishwasher, whatever it might be. All of these appliances that more and more states are starting to make you go electric on also, you're skyrocketing the demand. This is one house. Multiply this by however many houses are in a neighborhood, are on a power line, and so on. And you can see that this is going to be a significant load on the utility, So they have a couple options. Build more power plants that are basically not going to do anything during the day. That's expensive, inefficient. Combined cycle plants take some time to ramp up. It wouldn't work well. Build peaker plants. Think of that as like a massive utility scale generator, just an engine running on natural gas. That's a lot quicker to ramp up, a lot cheaper to build, but a lot more inefficient. So now your fuel costs rack up. Or encourage people to use less here. And when I say use less, I don't mean their home use less. I mean use less from the grid. And that's why they're pushing for policies like NEM 3.0, because now you're basically being forced to get this battery here. And the battery is charging up during the day when you're producing all this excess that, to be quite frank, the utility doesn't want and doesn't have a need for. You're going to hang on to it. Get to the evening, you're going to use it yourself. And now no longer are you that demand on the grid. Now, of course, they're going to find a way to still make you pay for it because they don't want to lose the money from you not buying electricity from them. But they also don't want the cost of building more and more plants. So this is the goal. We're trying to take our production and move it to when we actually need it. And that's the goal of what we're trying to accomplish with batteries here. You also need to factor in what's the lifespan, what's the warranty. So anytime you maximize self-consumption, you're going to be using your battery a whole lot more than when you're running it in a backup scenario. When I had Tesla Powerwalls in my old house, area was very, very outage prone. So I ran them 20 times a year or so. 20 times out of 365 days, that's a lot in a backup scenario. In a time of use or a daily consumption, self-consumption scenario, you're charging and discharging them multiple times per day. So maybe twice a day, you're looking over 700 cycles a year. Depending on how it's programmed, maybe more than that. So that's a much bigger load or much bigger wear and tear on this battery. Now, they're all lithium ion batteries. SolarEdge is lithium, nickel, cobalt. Enphase is lithium iron phosphate. Very, very minute differences. Basically, it just means the SolarEdge can be more compact and have a higher power output. The Enphase can, in theory, have more cycles, but we'll see with the warranty here. But they're all lithium ion. They all have 10-year manufacturer's warranties. Enphase, you have 10 years, 3,600 cycles. If you cycle that more than once a day, you're not making it for 10 years. SolarEdge has 10 years, unlimited cycles. Basically, my theory of why they did that was because they knew people would say, hey, lithium iron phosphate, that's going to last long. And they said, no, not really. It's just a tiny difference in the cathode. We're going to give you a better warranty to prove that we're going to last just as long, if not longer. Using it daily, this could be a big benefit to you because no matter how many times you cycle it, if you have a malfunction or if you drop below 70% residual charge, you're getting a replacement in that 10 years. And then there's options to extend the warranties. They're not covered by PowerCare right now. That may come at some point. But when I do my large battery systems, including for my house, I typically use Sonova for financing. They have their 25-year warranty and it covers the batteries for the entire time. And there's not even an extra charge anymore. It's built into their dealer fee. So that's a huge advantage, not to mention I've been seeing they're a lot cheaper than everyone else anyways lately. But to be able to tell someone, hey, I can basically guarantee you this battery is going to be replaced at least once because it's not going to last for 25 years. In my head, if you're warranting something for 10 years, I'm thinking lifespan of somewhere between 13 and 16 years, expected lifespan. So that's a huge, huge, huge selling point. Not to mention what Anthony mentioned earlier, if you're in California with those major utilities, Sonova currently has a free battery promo going on with leases. I'm not using it telling people, hey, we're going to give you a free battery. I'm telling people, hey, we're doing buy one, get one free batteries. Because for almost nobody is one battery going to be enough on a daily consumption profile. So you put one battery and they're thinking, great, I'm getting a free battery. And then their system's not built. They don't have two batteries because they don't want to pay for that second one. And they're not going to get the results that they're hoping for. I tell them, hey, buy one battery, we'll give you the second one for free. Now I just got them into that system that might be large enough for them, get them the experience they need. And we sold them a battery, helps your margin a little bit or more than a little bit. And it's just better win-win. They get the experience they need. You were able to get the system that they need. And they only paid for 1 out of 2 batteries, which is pretty cool. So what kind of special features do these batteries have? Pretty much all modern batteries have programmable usage profiles. So self-consumption, that is your person who just doesn't want to interact with the grid. Maybe they have a poor buyback. Maybe they have no buyback, but it's steady, right? That's what I was working on today, City of Leesburg. You buy electricity from them, it's 18 cents a kilowatt hour. To you California people, that probably sounds like a bargain. To us in Florida, that's expensive. I sell them electricity, I'm getting 5 cents a kilowatt hour. This person would want self-consumption, right? They want to hang on to all of the energy that they produce and never sell it back at that discount. You set a reserve level. That's the level that you don't ever want to discharge beyond during typical operations. That means that you retain some backup capability. So if my reserve is 20% and I'm depleting it through the day or through the night and it's 5 a.m. and somebody crashed into a telephone pole and power goes out, I still have 20% battery to get me through until the sun comes back out. They also have Storm Watch, Storm Guard, Weather Guard. Every brand has a different name, but it's a mode that will automatically switch to backup mode as long as you have it enabled whenever there's a severe weather event forecast for your zip code. So, we'll see it for high wind warnings. I've seen it in California for fire warnings, hurricane watches, so on. If you're on self-consumption mode and one of those happens to trigger for your zip code from the National Weather Service, your battery will switch to backup mode and it's going to hoard electricity and try and get full. So that way, if and when there's an outage, it has as much stored as possible. Speaking of backup mode, that is what I typically tell people in places that have one-to-one net metering, like our major utilities in Florida. That's what you want to keep your battery at. That's what I kept my Tesla batteries in my old house at. It keeps the battery full because you never know when an outage is going to happen. It's not necessarily because of the weather. Like I said, it might be grandma crashed into a telephone pole or something like that. It might be too many people's air conditioners kicked on at the same time and you browned out. So it's keeping your battery full, giving you the most backup potential when you need it. And in a utility that's one-to-one, there's no reason to cycle it and wear your batteries out. And then finally, time of use programming. This is kind of the newer one. This is what you're going to want to use in California with 3.0. All right, anywhere with time of use rates where your import and export rates change throughout the day. These rates get programmed and the battery is going to maximize savings, essentially. It's going to prioritize when to charge, when to discharge. It will attempt to charge when the energy is the cheapest. So when you're producing a lot and there's no value to send it to the grid, okay, cool, send it to the battery. It's going to deplete when the energy is most expensive for you to buy. If your production is not high enough, but you're at peak times and your utility in California is charging you 90 cents a kilowatt hour, pull it from the battery instead. And then maybe, we're still getting clarification on this, but maybe export surplus production at peak export rates. So if you remember that little green block on that chart I showed you, imagine if every single night in September between 6 and 8 o'clock, you could dump your battery for $3 a kilowatt hour. You have a 3 batteries. That's the last one I did in California, 30 kilowatt hours. That's $90 per day that you're generating. That's going to help. It's going to help the value proposition. Like I said, you can include the EV charger so you can prioritize charging when energy is in surplus, again, preventing you from exporting it, or I like to call it donating it in California now at certain times of the day. Or if you do need to import to charge, doing it when it's the cheapest to purchase. And then the load controllers can even be programmed to eliminate your low priority loads during peak hours. So maybe you don't want your electric dryer to be run at 3:30 in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the evening when your electricity costs are the highest, but you don't trust everyone in your family to listen to you. You can just program it where it doesn't have power during those hours. This is kind of what the app looks like. So you get to pick maximize self-consumption, time of use. They call it savings mode now, or backup only. Enphase has some similar programming. Again, it allows for time of use, import, export rates to be programmed in, and it directs the energy flow where it needs to go for the highest savings over the course of the day. Of course, Clipper Creek chargers are Enphase owned now. They do not connect directly to the inverters like the SolarEdge does. So they kind of have some of the benefit. They're able to be programmed to charge during off-peak rates, but I don't think currently they're able to charge using only excess production, meaning ramp up and down the rate of charging to match the surplus of what you're generating compared to what the rest of your house is using. And the reason for that is because they're not hardware connected to any of the inversion hardware. They say on their next generation of chargers that is going to be included through basically software and communications. That's going to be a pretty tricky proposition. So we'll see how that happens and what actually comes out when it comes out. But if they do, that would be great because, again, anything to prevent you from donating electricity to the utilities helps your value proposition tremendously. And then finally, design software. So obviously, one of the biggest struggles right now is how do you design a system under 3.0 or one of these similar scenarios elsewhere in the country? Do you want to build it to 70% offset with no batteries? Build it to 115% offset with batteries? What's going to be best for that specific home? So Solo obviously can't do it. That's why we're getting away from it. Vision, they're still struggling with modeling the battery self-consumption and the different programs. Even I've heard Aurora struggling with it, Sonova struggling with it, et cetera. So both Enphase and SolarEdge have either released or are in the process of releasing system design software. specifically able to use that brand's usage profiles and hardware selections. So I was using this today for that Leesburg project, the Solar Edge design tool, and it was able to tell me, hey, we recommend 3 batteries. And I looked at it and said, cool, that'd be awesome, but this homeowner, that blows way past their budget. What will 1 battery do? And I dropped it back down to 1 battery. And it's looking at that battery, it's looking at where the panels are located. We even programmed in the consumption profile for the house. So family with school-age kids. So now it's thinking about what time of day are they using the most electricity? Is it matched to production or is it not? 1 battery, solar system size, etc. And it's more accurately able to model when are we going to be exporting, when are we going to be importing, and more importantly, when are we just self-consuming, whether directly through production or through the battery. And it's able to come up with much more accurate savings predictions and post-solar bill predictions. And that's true for either the Enphase or Solar Edge software. I was just using the Solar Edge one today. These are not yet integrated into Vision, but that was the bulk of a lot of the conversations I had at SolarCon. We're making the connections. We're trying to get them. Both brands are willing to API this into Vision, basically for free, because it's going to help us sell their product. So fingers crossed, we'll see, but not yet integrated. But in the meantime, they're free. So I just designed it on their system and then force Vision to, override the numbers. And the big advantage here is you're programming the specific equipment that you're going to be using, the specific usage profile, the specific battery designation profile, the specific inverter capability. All of that is specific, rather than if you use any of the generic modeling software, it's just, okay, a 10 kilowatt hour battery. And it can't really go beyond that. The more detail, the more the specific your results are going to be, the more accurate what you tell the homeowner is going to be. Now we're going to talk a little bit about expansion systems. I want to put a little warning here. Powur does not do these in the way I'm about to talk about it yet. But this may be a place that we grow in California, because what you're about to see is pretty lucrative. So why would you potentially need to expand a system? A lot of people, especially in California, already have a solar system, right? In Florida, we see them a lot. They were sold by one of the big national companies who hired a bunch of college kids to go knock on doors, and they don't know the slightest thing about solar. So they put an 11.6 kilowatt system on everyone to avoid insurance. Or what I've been seeing lately is they put like a 7 kilowatt system in because it's cheaper and an easier sale. My average system size in Florida is about 18 kilowatts. So do the math. These people still have half or more of their electric bill at the end of it, but they were told it would wipe everything out. Maybe it was sized appropriately at some point, but they brought an EV. Ford Lightning uses more electricity in 30 miles than a California house, more in 60 miles than a Florida house in an entire day. Maybe you're one of these states that is making you give up your gas appliances and switch to electric. Electric dryer, electric stove, electric oven, ramp your usage up. Maybe your family got bigger. Maybe you put an addition on. Maybe you put a pool with an electric pool heater in. Any of these things, these major changes, suddenly you need more electricity. Now, with the wording of NEM 3.0, if they were put in under 2.0 and they add a system at the surface level, it looks like that would void their grandfather status. So that's going to discourage, and it was meant to discourage them from doing that, from adding it, because the utilities are frankly sick of losing customers, or wouldn't. So in California, your grandfather status is based on your inverter size, the AC size of your system, not the DC size. And the reason for this is because if it was based on if it wasn't based on the inverter, and at any point you had to do a replacement, an inverter went down, a microinverter went down, whatever, you had to replace it, suddenly you'd lose your grandfather status, and that wouldn't fly. So if you could add panels to an existing inverter without increasing that AC size, or even replace the inverter with one of the same output, you won't lose your grandfather status as of now, the way it's currently written. We'll see if they close that loophole. So if you remember, and you put a Solar Edge DC coupled battery on an energy hub, you can potentially oversize up to 200% without clipping. Clipping, for those of you who don't know, means when you're producing more than the inverter can handle, that excess is just lost. There's nowhere for it to go. And the reason for that, again, is because any energy that would have been clipped that exceeds that inverter size goes right into the battery, assuming that you did this properly and put a large enough battery for the home. So let's say you have a customer with an existing 8K system. It's running on a 7600 SolarEdge inverter, or maybe you got lucky and they have exactly 7600 watt output of an Enphase system, or Tesla or Delta or SMA or something like that. They recently purchased that Lightning and want to drive at 16,000 miles per year, aka my scenario. At half a kilowatt hour per mile, that's adding 8,000 kilowatt hours additional energy that they need. So what could you do? Replace their existing 7600 with an Energy Hub 7600. Guess what? To the utility, it's still just 7600. They don't care. They don't even have to know. Add solar panels as needed, up to a maximum now of 15.2 kilowatts on that 7600 Energy Hub, along with properly sized batteries. Add the SolarEdge charger to charge the car directly from that, from the surplus production, or when importing is the cheapest, and also be able to charge during an outage. They keep their grandfather status. They also meet their current energy needs. I'm pushing hard to get Powur to allow this. My 2 cents is it's not going to go anywhere until the backlog in California is worked through, because why would they right now? I mean, we've got probably almost 2 years worth of installs sold from the rush to N 2.0, but this is a great market opportunity moving forward. So different brand advantages. We're going to look at facts. We're going to look at my opinions. Some of you might have been able to guess them by now. The SolarEdge home system has advantages in the following: higher power output, a little bit stronger warranty, the unlimited cycles, the ability to run smart home integration, EV charging directly from the inverter. We talked about why that's an advantage, and then expansion systems we just talked about. Enphase systems have the advantage in the following: they're significantly easier to retrofit into an existing system. Not something we currently do, standalone batteries. But if we were to add this in the future, it's a lot easier to retrofit an AC coupled system, because you don't have to even touch the solar system. You don't have to care what inverter it has. As long as it's a recent enough model that it'll communicate with the IQ battery, it can be done. Whereas with SolarEdge, you'd have to rip out the existing unless they were sold, quote unquote, future proofed, which we've been doing lately, and putting energy hubs in whether they need batteries or not. Highly recommend doing that, by the way. It's only $200 or $300 more, and you're setting them up for success in the future. My experience, my opinions, I've sold dozens, more than dozens now, in the last 18 months of both brands. Back in the IQ7 days, my Enphase battery installations were great. In the last year, more than a year now, since the IQ8 and specifically the Controller 2 came out, I've had almost 100% failure rate of Enphase batteries. And it's almost always the Zigbee communications chip. I had another one go down today. Basically, Enphase relies on wireless communications between the battery and the Envoy, which is the controller for the system. When that goes down, the system doesn't know it has a battery. On a daily time of use rate, that could be a big deal. For us, that was an even bigger deal, because Hurricane Ian came through last year, and a lot of these systems never engaged their transfer switch. System didn't know it had a battery, it turned off. We had installers, and credit to Enphase, they sent their field service techs out also, running around with Harbor Freight inverter generators, wiring in a breaker, starting them up, turning them off, starting them on, turning it off, trying to simulate that the grid was up and going off until these things would engage. When people are investing a large amount of money, looking especially for backup for a disaster, and it doesn't work, it doesn't look very good. So I've lost a lot of confidence in their product. I haven't been selling them. I've been selling almost exclusively SolarEdge for battery systems. Now, since the introduction of SolarEdge battery, it has become my go-to. Biggest reason, even ignoring the other issues, biggest reason is the power output. When I'm building for backup, which is my primary customer, I mean, I'm putting batteries in probably 80% of my systems, and they're all backup oriented. Power output is king. The more power output I can get, the better I can set you up to run appliances without having to put more and more and more batteries and jacking that cost up. Now, of course, we're coaching them on rationing during the outage and then higher capability when you have solar output as well. We're using things like load controllers, smart panels, and so on to make that happen. But also it's a much simpler commissioning process because everything's directly connected to one central hub. You're not worried about that Zigbee chip. The fact that these batteries are designed to park in a garage, and one of the excuses I heard was that the Bluetooth in people's cars was causing the failure. Well, you design something to go in a garage. That's going to happen. They're going to have Bluetooth. Every car has Bluetooth now. My overall experience has been great. Not perfect, but great. Customer service, shout out to Jason, our rep with SolarEdge. He's the best manufacturer rep I've ever worked with in any role, in any company I've ever been with. You need something, he gets it. He answers questions, incredible. Can't recommend it enough. If you don't know him, reach out, talk to him. Their company supported training has been awesome. When their batteries first rolled out, they sent their engineers, without being asked, they sent engineers to my installations to help the crew learn how to do their project most efficiently, their product most efficiently. I mean, they flew them from California in some cases to come in and see these installs and help with it. That was pretty cool. They've also flown out for free to run training for a lot of our floater reps, rented rooms, bought us lunch, gave us free training. That was pretty cool. And again, some of them if I had to ask, it was one question. There was no nagging them or anything, but point is, all of that combines, it just gives me a lot of confidence working with them as a company. I have had a small number of DOA backup interfaces. That was primarily early on, but their new SolarEdge enhanced services, if you haven't heard of that, they've all been UPS overnighted, so we've been replaced immediately. And it delayed PTO by less than a week. As an outsider looking into California, because that's what I am. If you can't tell by my background, I don't live in California. I've only been there twice, I think. Batteries are about to be a huge part of your everyday pitch. You're about to be relying on them. There is no doubt about that. I personally believe that the SolarEdge product offers a big competitive advantage right now. That's not to say that's always going to be the case, and I don't have brand allegiance. My allegiance is to what I think is the best physical product for my customer. If that changes, my position will change. But right now, out of what we offer, I strongly believe that the SolarEdge home ecosystem is the most advantageous product that we can offer for your homeowners. Better warranty, better time of use management, that EV charger, smart home integration. We talked about all this already. Lower likelihood of an MPU. Until I started working in California, it blew me away hearing people talk about MPUs, because in 5 years in Florida, I've done 3, ever. I'm about to do my 4th, and it's because the homeowner says that their panel is old and she doesn't want an old one, even though it completely meets code and doesn't need to be upgraded. And then in the future, the ability to expand without losing grandfather status. Again, we can't do that now, but if you're talking to someone who thinks they might need more in the future, set them up for success. If you're putting them on an 8K system and you can put a 7600 energy hub in without triggering an MPU, just do it. Because now in the future, they can go up to a 15 kW system if needed. So set them up for success and tell them that you're doing that and why you're doing that. You learn a lot of trust. Little disclaimer, those were my personal opinions, the last 2 slides, based on my experience. Ultimately, you are all the solar professionals. It is up to you to provide unbiased guidance to your clients, design for them the best system possible. Biggest thing there is, in order to do that, do the homework and learn how to do that. Learn about each of the products we offer, learn about the new modeling software for 3.0, learn about the policies of your specific utilities. If you're not in California, like I said, there's small utilities everywhere that have policies worse than 3.0. Learn them and learn how to beat them, because they put those policies in place to try and beat you. Fight back and beat them. And with these, the system costs are going to be higher, right? There's no denying that. 3 batteries is 35 grand. On that note, real quick, I'll mention we are now doing non-backup batteries. Basically, they're not putting a transfer switch in. They do not give you any backup if the power goes out. They're about 30% cheaper. Places that have no outages, that might be worth considering. But anyways, regardless, a lot more expensive. The stakes are higher. I mentioned in the beginning, best referral sources I have are happy battery customers. Literally the best referral is someone's air conditioning running when it's 95 degrees out and none of their neighbors are. Because guess what happens? 30 to 45 days later, that street is full of my yard signs because we just put solar and batteries in all their neighbors' houses because they all want their air conditioning to work. But on the flip side, you mess this up, angry customer complaints are magnified when the system is $120,000 instead of 40, right? So if you think you've had angry customers before, they're a whole lot louder when these systems get this expensive. So just do your homework, do the back end, do it right, treat them right, and this will either grow or blow up your business depending which way you go with this. So any questions? If you need help with batteries, oh, I didn't change that slide. I now have my California license, so happy to help. I heard a couple questions with Sonova earlier. I use Sonova for almost all my deals. My first look right now because they're crushing everyone. You need help with Sonova, reach out. Happy to mentor some of those, walk you through it. There's my contact info. Feel free to reach out and let's take a look at some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all that, Mike. I did post you a video of from your YouTube on the chat. So if someone wants to click on that, subscribe to him, check out those videos. I'm sure that will help out as well. And main thing, I see Brad, I guess you guys met at SolarCon, Bradley Lordson. Yep. But he had mentioned Franklin batteries. Obviously, we've heard talk about that going on. Do we have any ETAs on that?
So I have to be careful what I say. There is talk of bringing Franklin on, and here's my sense on it. Talking to them, there's some advantages, there's some disadvantages. If we start doing retrofits, and I'm talking standalone batteries, Franklin's would in many cases be my go-to. And the reason for that is they're AC coupled. We talked about before why that's easier. They're inverter agnostic, which means they really don't care. You could have SolarEdge, Enphase, Delta, SMA, Tesla, whatever. It doesn't matter because as far as the inverter is concerned, it's still on grid. The power never went out. It doesn't know. But there's a couple problems with Franklin where if I'm starting from scratch, I'm still going to lead people to the SolarEdge battery. If they insisted on Enphase for their system, and we're still talking the current Enphase battery that I don't trust, I would probably use a Franklin in that case. But the problems that I see with the Franklin are their throughput warranty, meaning how much energy can flow through the battery before it voids. So rather than cycles, they're going off of throughput. Is one that if you use it on a daily basis, you're going to expire your warranty, I think around 6 or 7 years rather than 12, which they advertise. So again, you could mitigate that by going through Sonova, that's fine. But that's kind of a red flag to me. And then the other thing is, as of right now, from what I understand from them, they have basically a single time that they're looking for solar production to kick on. And what I mean by that is, imagine you're in a scenario and over the course of the night, your battery fully depleted down to its safety threshold. It is going to be programmed to look at, let's say, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning, something like that, and basically to send what little bit of electricity it has back at the inverter, essentially playing Marco Polo with the solar inverter, send that there so the inverter thinks that it's on grid. It doesn't know that the utility is still down. It thinks it's on grid, and see if that inverter sends electricity back. And if it's not sending enough electricity back to meet the needs, the system will shut back off again. So if you had a multi-day storm or something, you're in the Northeast and your solar is buried in snow or something like that, it only has one time per day that it's going to do that. So if 9 o'clock in the morning, it's still stormy, but that storm blows through at 9:30, guess what? You get to wait till the next day. I hope they address that through programming, but as of right now, it's not. And that's just an inherent problem with any of the inverter agnostic batteries because there's no direct communications. Rather than even the Zigbee chip for Enphase or the Ethernet cable for SolarEdge, rather than directly communicating, it's quite literally playing Marco Polo with electrons. and that's always going to be
that could cause issues,
yeah.
communication issues. Okay. Cool.
Is that all we got in there? Anybody have any live questions?
Questions. Now's the time to mute. Show your pretty faces too.
Well, I don't have any questions, but that was an excellent presentation, my
Yeah.
friend.
I
Yes,
appreciate it.
excellent. Mhm.
Yep.
I mean, they don't have questions, probably a good thing, because you did a awesome job.
I could tell he's a huge Enphase fan. That's all he. So.
Right.
Hey, to be fair, I sold dozens of their batteries. So
I love Spencer to death, but the last few weeks we've had, both Spencer and Michelle on, and my last few deals have been Solar Edge. So yeah.
At some point right now, there's opinion out the door. There's a quantitative advantage, especially in the California market.
Yep.
Some things that maybe they can address through software, I don't know, but a lot of the things are advantages that are based on having hardware that can link together.
Yeah, I do have a question. So,
Sure.
is it possible to combine two storage batteries plus the Saver battery? You can do both of those, correct? Is that
There'd be no reason to. So the only reason, let me back up. The batteries themselves, between the backup and the time of use or daily consumption non-backup option, the batteries are the exact same. There's no difference. The only difference in what makes it cheaper is that you don't have a backup interface for Solar Edge or the ATS, the transfer switch with Enphase.
Right.
So you don't have those pieces of hardware. That's not a big difference. The big difference is labor. When you have to wire something up for backup, in some states, like here in Florida, if I do a big enough backup, we can just run it off the main panel easy, but it's still, you need a master electrician there because you're going in between the main panel and the meter. You're putting the transfer switch in. It just by code requires a master electrician to do that. That's expensive. I mean, I don't even know how many hundreds of dollars per hour now for a master electrician. And then in other areas, like in California, my understanding is even if your system's big enough, they still make you put it on a sub panel for backup. So now you're pulling all of those breakers. You have to run wire extensions, move them all over. It's labor intensive and it's expensive labor intensive. So that's where your savings come from. And even if you had, we'll be extreme. Let's say you had 4 non-backup batteries, 1 backup battery, all of that work still has to be done. So there would be no savings whatsoever. If you're going to have any backup need whatsoever, it's all that.
You said they were cheaper, though, about 30% cheaper. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's just because of labor. And the savings actually kind of diminishes as you get to larger battery systems because it's dispersed. So my take on it, I mean, personally, I don't know that I'll ever sell them non-backup because my entire customer focus is, we'll just be honest, preppers. But if I had, if I'm entering a deal in California, we just have to put them in, or if it was this Leesburg one and we're just financially constrained and we have 1 battery, but they won't pay the 15, 16,000 for the full backup, but they might pay 11 or 12 for, to get some savings. There's some advantage there on the small side. Now we start talking 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6 batteries. You're taking that savings and it's being diluted among more and more batteries. Where $3,000 savings on $15,000, $16,000 is a lot. $3,000 savings on $45,000, can be missed. And at that point, there's not much financial incentive compared to the potential benefit of being able to have backup. Even in places that don't think they need it right now, if we just look statistically, the grid is getting more and more unreliable. Outages are happening in places they've never happened before. The more electric vehicles and the more, I'm guilty of this. I'm either getting a Lightning or a Rivian. That thing has the battery capacity of 14 of our batteries that will probably be cycled almost daily. Think of the load that's putting on the grid. And I'm in Florida where that's not super common. Think of California, Colorado, places that have a lot of EV incentives and where gas is really expensive. So people are getting EVs. that load on the grid is exceeding the grid's capability to supply that electricity, you're going to get more and more outages. So I'm not completely sold on the pure savings batteries.
Right. It sounds about the same to me because I believe in backup storage. I believe every home should have storage for its battery. Every home in America should have that.
Agreed.
So yeah, I agree with you on that. 'Cause I'm not too keen on that either.
Yeah.
On those self-consumption batteries. So I feel you.
If it was up to me, I'd sell 4 batteries to every single house in America, and then
Right.
I'd retire.
Right.
Sorry,
Yeah. The only problem we're gonna run into is probably, like I said, adding another $30,000 to a system that we was selling under 2.0. For
Yeah.
so that's the only problem, is trying to get people to buy into I need this backup instead of, oh well, this is too expensive. So
No, you
that's
live in
the big-
California, right? Or you
Yes,
work in
correct.
California?
That's correct. Yeah.
So even with batteries in California, you still have a 6 to 8 year ROI. In Florida, without batteries, I'm like 14, 15 years. So I'm still jealous of your value proposition out there. Certainly the sales market is probably going to slow down a little bit there. Just from everybody who got in on the rush. But it's going to pick back up because they have a blank slate to just raise your rates, thinking they have no recourse now. So when they're charging you 60, 70, 80, I've seen as high as 90 cents at certain times of the day per kilowatt hour. I mean, I'm looking at my electric bill right now and I'm paying 19 cents and I'm pissed about that. Like, paying for my permits to come in so my system gets installed. Compared to 90 cents, we can put batteries in all day. I mean, the one I did most recently there, we put 3 batteries in. It was like a 28 kilowatt system, I think, with 3 batteries. And his ROI is like 6 years. It's crazy. It blows my mind. And real quick, Dana in the chat, I wasn't saying the cost of batteries. I agree with you. The cost decreases with multiple. The cost difference between backup capable and backup incapable, that savings you get from doing the savings only battery, that gets diluted across multiple because the cost of the batteries, the unit cost goes down when you do multiple. So yes.
So real quick, what's your kind of go-to when doing a Sonova and you're doing a 20, 30 kilowatt battery? What's your go-to with the finance or term interest rate?
So right now, I've actually just noticed that different markets have different interest rates with Sonova.
I did not know that.
So right now in Florida, which I can most speak to, leases are crushing it. I did a lease for my house. The big advantage that they just added on the lease is they're covering the homeowner's insurance. So I don't have to add the system to my homeowner's insurance. In Florida, our homeowner's insurance is a complete disaster. So that's a big, big deal for us. But I do leases with no escalator. And compared and for all of us here, right, we're mostly self-employed. So the tax credit's tricky, right? You get a benefit from it, but you're not really getting a check back probably. So when I compared it to Goodleap, who I originally went under contract with while Sonova was still finishing bringing in the SolarEdge batteries, compared to what my payment would have been there, I'm saving almost $300 a month going with the lease. So I mean, I'm doing systems for people with Duke, if anyone's familiar with Florida, putting 2 batteries in and breaking even on their electric bill, which the loan options right now, I haven't really looked at the sunlight being back, but the Goodleap loan options recently, solar alone, I could barely break even in a lot of cases. So doing the leases, I'm able to get them a really good payment without having one of those massively inflated dealer fee inflated loans and saying, hey, I can save you $10 a month, but now you have $125,000 loan on your credit for the next 25 years. So it's become beneficial on people who insist on ownership. The Sonova 25-year 6.9%, 6.99 has been my go-to. It usually ends up being within $10 a month of the 3.99%, which I think just went away. But within $10 a month of that and $20,000 or $30,000 cheaper for the loan. So, I'll pay an extra $6 to not have $30,000 more debt. And most people that I've showed it to agreed.
Yeah.
But yeah, right now, the only people I'm running outside of Sonova are, I have one mentee who gets a lot of leads that don't have socials. So Sonova doesn't do that, but GoodLeap does. GoodLeap will take an ITIN, so I have to go that way for them. But everybody else, I'm leading with Sonova because I can come in with a larger margin and crush any other quote that they had easily. Plus, when we're doing batteries, 25-year warranty is incredible.
No brainer, yeah.
Let's see, Justin, sorry. If I was selling primarily in California, would I limit to 100% offset? Probably not. And the reason for that is on a month-to-month basis, your production doesn't always, if you were at 100% annual offset, you're not going to have 100% specific month offset. There'll be some months that you overproduce and some months you underproduce. So my goal would be to try and almost treat it as though I were building a complete off-grid system. As long as that was cost effective for them, and make sure that I'm oversized enough that even on the lower production months that I'm still at least offsetting their peak consumption. And now I'm talking about having batteries. If I was doing this without batteries, I'd probably be about a 70% offset, and really just trying to directly offset with as little exporting as possible. The other advantage to oversizing is just that everyone's consumption is going up. So they might deny to the hilt that they're going to use any more electricity next year. I like the phrase solar invincibility syndrome. It's common here in Florida. People get solar, and next thing you know, their thermostat's 2 or 3 degrees lower. And they claim that they're never going to make any changes, but they do. So I always try to build people around 110 to 115%.
You got a couple phrases that I wrote down.
They're all
Redundance
trademarked.
and
So if you use
security,
them,
by KLN.
yeah, they're all trademarked. So you got to send me royalties if you use them.
Got it. Every sale, you get a 5 cent per watt over it.
Take it.
Let me understand. So you said you basically, are you pushing more for, you said leasing now? Are you pushing that more than finance?
Yeah. So, I mean, the only thing I would say is I'm not pushing. So I take a different sales approach than probably what any salespeople would ever teach. But that's because I come from an engineering background, not a sales background. So I kind of come in and try to just teach them about the system. And I'll show them, here's what the lease looks like. Here's what the loans look like. And the leases have been the most popular. I mean, if I thought they were bad, I wouldn't have done it for my house. And I'll tell them that. But I like specifically 0 escalator leases. I'm not a fan of escalators. I think they're kind of a scam. Because a big advantage of what we're selling is we're locking in your payment, right? And I like to make, because we often don't have huge day one savings like you would in California here. So I tell people, like, hey, if we could go back in time 3 or 4 years, and I met you at a gas station and offered you a card that locked in your price of gas today and it didn't cost you anything, would you take it? And of course they all would, right? Because I'm spending almost $2,000 a month on diesel right now. Back then, diesel was $1.20 a gallon. So of course I would have taken that. That's exactly what we're doing here with solar. Even if we're break even today, you're locked in. And, I really try to get them to understand that. And the leases are giving, basically for anyone except for those people who are investment minded and are going to try to pay this thing off ASAP, leases are giving the best savings. And when you read the contract, lease is kind of a 4-letter word to a lot of people, probably especially out your neck of the woods, because you had Sunrun and Solar City and all them pushing kind of those predatory leases for a long time. Our leases, especially if you do the 0% escalator, are much, much less predatory, for lack of a better term. They're easy to transfer. They have a 620 credit score they inherit. The end. There's no debt going on your credit report. 0% escalator, so that it never changes. You get the warranty for 25 years. At the end of it, you can negotiate 2 5-year extensions. And people are like, okay, well, I won't own it at the end of that. Who cares? It's a 35-year-old system at that point, right? Yeah, you could pay an extra however many thousands over the next 25 years to own it, or lease it and get a new one in 35 years. You're probably going to want a new one in 35 years anyways. So that just saves you from having to pay to throw it in or send it to hopefully recyclers by then. Because it's Sunnova's equipment, it's their problem.
Yeah. That's funny you should mention that, because I have a niece that works for Sunrun, and she said they are crushing the lease industry right now. So she said they really, really selling a lot of leases. So when I heard you say that, it kind of made me wheels start turning a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know for a fact that this is the reason, but the best explanation I've got for why the leases are suddenly more competitive than the loans is the way the tax credit is currently written. Homeowners can get 30%. A business owner can get up to 40%, depending on the equipment used, plus depreciation. So when you lease it, Sunnova owns a system, or for your niece, Sunrun owns a system, they can claim a bigger credit than the homeowner themselves could. So they get a bigger benefit from it that way, and it gets passed on. Not to mention, Sunnova just got a $3 or $4 billion DOE loan guarantee, and things like that. They're a massive company. They can access capital much cheaper than anybody who's taking out one of these loans that, they have a UCC1 against the equipment. That doesn't really secure the loan, because what value is 10-year-old equipment, 10-year-old solar equipment? If the bank were to come and rip it off and try and resell it, it's effectively an unsecured loan. So the approvals, if we're being honest, are probably too lenient. They at least were. They probably still are. And I think that's part of why the dealer fees are so high, because they just have to make money up front, or else they're not going to make it. We saw what almost happened with Sunlight.
I agree. Well, cool. I mean, I know it's almost 5:30 your time, it's about 2:30 our time. So if no one else has any questions, we could start ending the call.
All right. Well, you all have my contact info here. Anyone needs anything, feel free to reach out. Best to email or text. Very seldom am I able to just directly answer the phone, just because of scheduling.
Yep. Your presentation was smooth as silk, brother. I love it, man. It's just your whole style and everything is just laid back and just smooth, man. It was awesome.
I appreciate it.
Yes, indeed.
Anthony, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, of course.
Always happy to do this kind of stuff. So
we appreciate the presentation and everything, and lots of value brought to the team. We appreciate it. And you are obviously local in Florida, so anyone looking for a mentor in Florida, and obviously you're HIS. You have a HIS license in California as well. So plug in if you need Mike, tag him. But cool. Alrighty, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you, Mike, and awesome. So let's get to selling.
All right.
Thanks, Mike.